Hello there. Seems like it's been a while since I've talked to you all through the magic of video. I thought I would try this rather than writing it all out, but we'll see how it works in terms of feedback on the test. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. Each of you have specific comments, either embedded in the papers or under the answers, depending on the timed or the take-home portion. So hopefully that is helpful. But here's some general stuff to think about, starting with the timed essay portion. On question one, well, first, good to see that people pretty generally split up the answers. Some did 1 and 2, some 1 and 3, some 2 and 3. It was pretty equally spread, so that's good. I like to make sure there truly is a choice. In terms of number one, I think the biggest issue was at the beginning. Everybody wanted to jump straight to the 5 forces and tell me that there was buyer power and supplier power, and yeah, okay, I got that. But what you didn't tell me was, why does Porter and other industry analysts think that industry matters so much? What is it about the assumptions? Their notion that resources are fairly heterogeneous and available to all, and the industry explains everything. Kind of, where does that come from? What's behind that? You needed to at least have addressed that a little bit, and then broadly kind of how they get to 5 forces rather than 2 or 8 or anything else. Then you can go into each of the specifics of the 5 forces, but you got to put some context on it, not just come spew back some facts you can read out of the book. That's not the intent of the essay. Understanding is. The other part was in your examples. Generally like the examples. People came up with a variety of things, kind of interesting to read. But one thing I did ask in the question you see here is how the forces differ between the 2 industries, and the impact of that on the relative levels. In a number of cases, people wanted to tell me, here's this industry, it's favorable, here's this other industry, it's unfavorable, but you didn't really highlight kind of differences between them. And in some cases, it was kind of hard to tell because each industry had some favorable and some unfavorable. So what was it that made you put one in the favorable, overall favorable category and one in the unfavorable? So going a little further there. On the 2 companies trying to do their valves and move out of the medical products industry, Gamma and Sigma. And my apologies for sneaking in an Omega in there. I changed names and missed one. So sorry if that caused any confusion. If you're curious, this is truly based on a real company who is primarily in the medical products industry, but also makes valves for life rafts, escape slides, other things like that, which I thought was curious when I bumped into it. So people generally were on track there. Clearly there are going to be differences if you're mostly staying in one and doing the other. But you see the little words here. Clearly show how the recommendations for any structural changes would help the firm take advantage of the appropriate capabilities. So you needed to make sure that you kind of made those linkages if they need to get better at R&D, if they need to get better at production, if they need to get better at marketing outside. How does the structure that you recommended help them do that? So those connections were not always there. On the third one, can people be the source of sustainable competitive advantage? Big issue there was not using class concepts and models. Whether you argued for or against, you want to tell me generally, yes, people can do stuff, or no, people, it's not really the people, it's the things they do. I don't care which way you went, but what you needed to do was tell me that when we're analyzing the ability of resources and capabilities to provide an advantage, we need to look at things like scarcity, uh, uh, relevance, replicability, durability, transferability. Um, many people just didn't touch on those things at all, but those are what determine whether a resource or capability really can provide a competitive advantage. Um, so you needed to have talked about that. The other piece was the capturing that value. We had discussions, there's stuff in your book that talks about whether the individual is going to appropriate that value. One person who's really cool at ideas is going to be able to capture uh, higher salaries, perks, etc. If, however, you can embed all of those people into routines and processes, then the firm is more likely to capture the value. So you needed to have addressed that part of it. On the miles and snow part, various ways people went, um, mostly on track for most people. When we go to the take home case, first part is kind of the general comments. The sections and structure I was suggesting were designed to help you build a logic towards your recommendation. When you jump ahead to essentially making a recommendation early, what are you making that recommendation on? How do you know that that's going to be the case? I'm trying to get you in your answer to build the logic. And to do that, according to what we've kind of talked about, according to your book, if you actually went back and looked at the chart and reference I made, page 24, whatever it is, all right, it says you got to kind of go through a sequential process. You need to analyze the current strategy, the current performance, the current environment, the current capabilities. Oh, look, that's items 1 through 4. And then you can kind of put all that together to identify fit, and from that, really uncover the real issues. Is the fact that they've got storage out in tanks outside an issue? Well, it is only if they're trying to do certain things. So we needed to have analyzed all those pieces and then see whether that is really something that matters or not. Um, Once we've done all of that, then we can make the recommendations for how to improve, starting with the choice of the building. But we need to tie all of those things back into that analysis, into fit, into addressing the issues. So, as people wandered away from that or kind of lost that logic, you got marked down some because of that. In terms of specifics, it did ask you explicitly in the instructions to be sure to utilize class concepts and ideas in your analysis, and that you must justify your conclusions and recommendations. You got to watch in a class like this because you can just talk from your own business knowledge. But we've been going through a model and processes and pieces and wholes, and you need to tie those things into your answer. So strategy we have talked about is where and how. Many of y'all put lots of different things into your discussion of strategy. And the environment and key success factors. This is an industry level thing, not a firm. And key success factors need to kind of flow out of your underlying analysis of the broad environment and conditions, of the 5 forces, of all of those things. There ought to be kind of a logical connection there. Capabilities, again, when it came to whether they had advantages, you needed to have mentioned things like scarcity, relevance, replicability, transferability, etc. Do the things they have meet those criteria or not? Otherwise, how do you know whether it can really create an advantage? Maybe a good thing to have, but can it really create an advantage over other firms? Again, on the fit stuff, stay at the strategy level. Don't get too far down into the weeds. And then when you make your recommendation, and I don't care whether you said they should build it now, build it later, not build it at all, but you got to clearly tie your choices on that and the specific implementation issues back into your analysis of fit and the underlying issues. So, hope all of that helps, kind of makes sense. I am happy to talk with any of you about your exam if you're unclear as to why you got what you got. But before we talk, you need to have done a few things. You need to have watched this video and thought about the feedback that's being given. You need to have read through the comments that I made on your test. And then you need to have all of that in mind as you thoughtfully and thoroughly reread your answers, because I'm grading what you wrote. I am not grading what you intended to write, what you had in your head, any of those things. I try to read between the lines as much as I can, but ultimately I got to go to what's on the piece of paper. So again, watch the video, think about the feedback, read through the specific comments I have made on your test, on the various answers, then thoughtfully and thoroughly reread your answers. And then if you still have questions, by all means, holler at me, and I'll see if I can explain things to you. So, guess that's it.